G'day, Gord. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Good, good. How are you, Brent?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. I've been looking at your work and following you for some time and pretty impressed with what I've seen. How about you tell us a little bit about why you do what you do?
Okay. I've been doing it for probably 9 years now, but more seriously in the past 4 or 5 years. And mostly I've been doing it to pause for a second.
Yeah, you're right.
Um,
How about we start with how you got started? Talk about what drove you down the path.
okay. Sorry. I
You're all right.
apologize. Yeah,
Take
just
your
kind of
time.
gone blank. Yeah.
Take your time. Have you always been into photography, or is it something that you sort
No, I
of?
haven't actually. No, I picked up the camera when we knew we were going to have my son actually. And
Hmm.
that was the biggest reason why I started photography because I wanted to learn a little bit of portrait to take pictures of my son.
Sure.
And so I just started to learn a little bit here and there. And one night I went to a park in St. John's actually. It's called
Yep.
Mooring Park. And during the winter, they'll have it all done up with Christmas lights. And I took my camera down, of course, and I tried a few shots, few handheld shots. This was at night, so I didn't know what I was doing.
Yep.
And quarter second shots, so they were a little bit blurry, but they came out okay in my eyes, of course. And anyway, so I posted a few, and some people liked it, and a few people asking for prints. It just went from there. So I got interested into landscape photography a little bit after that, and one thing led to another. So I started, of course, down the rabbit hole of YouTube. A lot of photographers have done, of course, and it was an addiction actually. So I would learn a little bit here and there. I'd start with learning a little bit about the exposure triangle, all the
Yep.
basic stuff, composition, all that kind of stuff. And sorry, man.
You're right.
Trying to gather my.
Yeah, you're fine. So you started out in YouTube and you started developing your skills, I guess, understanding the camera and the gear a little bit better. What then sparked the interest in landscapes per se?
I'd say that probably goes back further from when I was a teenager. I lived
Hmm.
in Ontario for until I was about 13.
Yep.
And so anyway, my parents decided to move back home, and we drove, well, from Ontario to Newfoundland, which is about 2,000 kilometers, and drove through Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia was absolutely beautiful. I had no
Hmm.
idea. But then we got off the boat at Port aux Basques. A little while after, you start seeing all the mountains, and I had no idea because the last time I was in Newfoundland, I was 9 years old, and
Yep.
I lived in St. John's, which is, and I pretty much hadn't been outside of St. John's, so I didn't really know what Newfoundland was like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I always remembered that, and I was always Newfoundland was. I had no idea how beautiful it was.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Newfoundland and what people could expect to see if they visited?
Oh, there's plenty, of course. You got everything from up on the northern peninsula, Gross Mourne, and the Long Range Mountains, the Tablelands, which is a crazy place actually. When you're driving down the road, you can see in the summertime, it's cool. You got green on one side and it looks like Mars on the other.
Wow.
So they're the complete opposites. And there's only one other place like the Tablelands. It's in the world. I thought it was Australia, but I could be wrong on that. And it's something to do with the Earth's mantle
Okay.
that had come up somehow thousands of years ago, and not a lot grows there. So that's why it's got that like little Mars look.
Yep.
Also, then you got down on the west coast. There's some beautiful mountains like the Wreck House, Codroy Valley, and then Central, which is where a lot of the icebergs will come down in April and May and June. And then shortly after that, you'll see the whales.
Yep.
And then, of course, on my side of the island, the East Coast, you got St. John's, which is a beautiful city. It's an old city. They say it's the oldest city in North America. So it's got a lot of history and it's got a lot of interesting architecture and old buildings.
Cool.
Yeah, and then just not too far from me, with it anywhere within a couple of hours, there's plenty of coastline, plenty of sea stacks,
Yeah.
all kinds of landscapes.
Yeah. So you got, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've got forest, mountains, sea, icebergs, Arctic tundra. You've got that Mars-like structure. It sounds like you've got it pretty much all.
There's a huge variety. It definitely, I definitely, it's a photographer's playground for sure. Yeah, and it's great because now, of course, fall. It's beautiful in certain parts of the island during fall. So I'm heading down to the west coast now next week, and that's absolutely beautiful. All kinds of fall colors, plenty of coastlines to play with, and then, of course, there's places on the island you can do winter photography. But then when the spring hits, the icebergs will come down. Not every year is great, but most years you'll definitely get plenty of big icebergs in certain parts of the island. So they'll start at the northern tip of Newfoundland, right down to Central, right down where I am on the East Coast. And they call that Iceberg Alley. Yeah. And some years there's thousands of icebergs.
And quite a lot of them beach themselves on the coast as well, don't they?
They do. Yeah, they do. And this year we had one in Triton. That was a massive iceberg. And that one hung around in that spot for, it had to have been 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
So plenty of opportunities to get up close and personal.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, for sure. People taking you out in boats, and it was close enough to shore. You could just, I was using wide angle sometimes.
Wow.
So it was that close, right?
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite spot? Where do you like to shoot, and what keeps calling you back?
There's a couple actually. Chance Cove comes to mind as one of my favorite places. It's a place, it's about an hour from where I live, and there's two fairly big sea stacks, one bigger than the other, where there's like plenty of bald eagles, plenty of wildlife. In the spring, you'll get the capelin, just like a little small fish. I don't know if you know what a capelin is. It's almost the size of a
come across it before, but yeah, go on, describe it.
The whales follow them in, so it's sort of one of their food sources. And they're probably the size of they're probably smaller than a mackerel. All right, and they'll roll up on the beach and flop around, and like huge schools. And when you're there near the beach, you'll see like the water will turn black.
Wow.
All of a sudden, and the capelin are there. Yeah, so that's bald eagles, capelin along the beach there, and of course the two big sea stacks. And then out in the distance in July, you'll hear the whales coming up, right? Yeah, but there was an interesting story actually. Last trip I made to Chance Cove, actually. It was one of my favorite shots, actually. I went up and I was at the second sea stack. It's this really tall sea stack, and I'm up on this trail looking down, and you can see the beach down below, and the capelin were rolling along the beach, and the bald eagles were hovering above. Took my shots that morning. It was beautiful. So on the way back, I was walking along the trail, and I heard a big swoosh coming out of the trees, and I turn, and here's a massive bald eagle coming straight for me.
Wow.
And I had the tripod at the ready. But luckily he swerved about 5 feet away from me.
Wow.
But the adrenaline was going.
I can imagine. I remember actually when I was about 5 or 6, I think, and I was we're at this wildlife park that the parents took me to. We have a wedge-tail eagle, which is the biggest eagle in Australia, and they can have a 2-meter wingspan on them. And yeah, this thing was on a perch, and he basically flew up off the perch. It was actually had a collar on his leg, so he couldn't go too far. But literally, he just about landed on my head as a 5-year-old. Freaked me out.
Oh my God. Yeah, and they couldn't definitely do some damage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I'm glad he swerved.
yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah,
So,
that's oh
go on.
sorry. No, I'll say that's definitely one of the places that I keep going back to. First time I was at that place, I was blown away just by the size of the sea stacks and just from the different types of compositions you can shoot there. I don't just shoot landscape, of course. I'm doing
No,
some like cultural shots, things like that as well, and fishing stages, sometimes the city. But I really like the pure landscapes and the seascapes and sea stacks are definitely my favorite.
yeah. I was going to ask how you would describe your style to somebody that hadn't seen any of your work.
I don't know if I have a one particular, I can't pinpoint my style, but I do like atmosphere. I do adding a little bit of magic in there a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, as well as trying to, keep the scene as authentic as possible.
Sure.
Obviously, I do edit. There's no question about that. But I do like long exposures, and it depends on what the scene is, of course.
Sure.
But I can't really put my foot like on what my particular style would be.
Yeah.
I would say because I'm still changing a lot. I don't,
You don't stick to any particular genre. And I guess no wonder
no,
living where you do. You've got wildlife, you've got architecture, you've got the landscapes as well. I guess for me, when I see it, very vibrant colours and really, I guess, crisp, but very realistic imagery. And to me, it really gives a sense of the place in which the photo has been taken. For me, it transports me there. I can feel the chill in the air when, you've got your autumn colours which are coming on now, and you can feel, oh yeah, it's definitely going to be getting a little bit colder there than where I am now. We're headed in towards summer now.
oh, for sure. It was like 5 degrees the other day, but felt like one. So it was, yesterday morning there was frost on the grass, so it's definitely quite cold now. Yeah.
So, do you have goals in your photography, and do you think it's important to have goals in your photography?
I don't really have goals in a sense that, okay, I need to achieve something. I think I'm more driven with my photography just to improve. If I see something that a particular style or a particular technique that I think could be useful for something that I already have in mind. I might have a particular location
Yep.
that I have in mind, and I may try to learn a technique to do justice to that particular scene I have in mind.
Yep.
For example, sorry, no, for example, we have a ship that's at Harbor Grace that's been sitting there since 1969. It's an old ship just sitting there in the harbor, and I always thought that that would look really cool as a ghost ship.
Yep.
And learning some long exposure techniques and with the right conditions, I think I captured one of my favorite shots. A very ghostly looking, ethereal looking scene.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess living where you do, I'm always interested in the nexus between your place, your subject, and your technique. And I'm interested in whether or not photographers have actually thought about which one comes first. Is it where you live drives the types of shots that you take and the subjects that you take? Or is it the subjects that you take that drives where you live to a certain degree? Because some people make choices about where they live because of what they like to shoot. Or does the technique and what your style of shooting and how you want to shoot drive the other two?
I would say the subjects definitely do drive the types of techniques that I choose to do for sure. Obviously, there is quite a bit of a variety here, but so I definitely do use a wide range of techniques to capture some of the scenes, and I use focal lengths all the way from 14 all the way up to 200.
Yeah.
Probably some more beyond it, but mostly I go from 200 or below.
Yep. Yep.
But I hear landscape photographers say all the time they use they shoot from 14 to 35, 100 to 200, and they don't shoot anything in between. But here in
Yeah.
Newfoundland, like I would say there's plenty. Most of my shots are from 35 to 70 mil because of
Okay.
some of the scenes that we have here in the fishing communities. It lends itself better to use that focal length.
Yeah, to get in a little bit tighter than that sort of
Tighter, a little
broad
less
grand landscape sort of thing.
yeah, and a little less distortion for certain buildings. Sometimes it's nice the distortion is, but sometimes it's better for it to just look the way you see it, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So those focal lengths lend itself well to those subjects.
Yeah. Do you set yourself any projects when you're thinking about your work? Are you, I guess, it's a way of asking the question around planning versus being more spontaneous. Are you somebody that has a concept before they go into the field and says that's what I want to shoot and that's where I'm going to go and I know where I'm going to stand and I've measured it all out in photo pills and all the rest of it and I know where the sun's going to come up or the moon or whatever? Or are you more, okay, I'm going to turn up, what I get is what I get?
I do some planning. It depends. If it's close to where I live, if it's within an hour or two, I'll do plenty of planning. Like it won't be too extensive, but in the sense of, okay, I want certain conditions
Sure.
for a particular scene I have in mind. And I can just wait for those conditions because only within an hour or two from that particular location. But if I'm traveling to a place I'm going to spend 4 or 5 hours, the most planning I'll do is just check the forecast
Yeah,
and
right.
see what forecast suits the locations that are within, say, an hour of where I'm staying. And I'll make a decision based off what the forecast is for each of those locations. But of course, first thing I'll usually do when I do go into a place that I'm staying for 3 or 4 days, I'll do plenty of scouting
Yeah.
ahead of time. And then, of course, I would make my decisions based off that. But yeah, so and then when I'm on the scene itself, yeah, I'll size it up with my camera through looking through the viewfinder to see if I can take advantage of the wide angle distortion,
Yeah,
when it
right.
comes to say flowers or say a sea stack or whatever, just to see what the lines are going to look like. Or I might zoom in just to see what the frame is going to look like. Just simple stuff like that.
Yeah. So are you, I guess, more into the artistic side or the realistic side of photography? Are you trying to portray what exactly how you see it, or are you trying to do something more artistic with it? And by that, aside from editing, I mean in terms of composition, in terms of color, and in terms of how you actually pull that shot together.
Both, I would say.
Okay.
And it depends on the shot, of course.
Sure.
Some scenes it lends itself to just take the shot, get all the information you need, and bracket if you need,
Yep.
and just take the shot. And then there's other scenes where, yeah, I'll definitely play with long exposures to give it that ethereal look, to make the water look very milky or ethereal around the rocks.
Sure.
I'll definitely do some of that. But I would say some of my best shots are just taking the shot. Right? For example, I did a trip there recently down in Buren,
Yep.
and started out the morning was before the sun came up. It was extremely foggy, And I had started in this area called Port and there was an old boat there laid on the side of shore on the side of the shore, and it had some nice reflections, and it was very foggy. I just took a couple of snaps. That's all to a shot. Just frame it up and shoot it. Is not much more to it than that. And then the fog would not lift. So I didn't think I was going to get a sunrise. So I went down to another location that's in Burin itself that I had shot the night before. So decided to run down there and just to see what it would look like. And the sun was just starting to come up, and the fog lifted a little bit in the distance,
Yep.
but it was these set of houses that are just out on the edge by themselves. And so it lit up the fog, the sun did,
Nice.
and it pretty much, fog itself, had covered everything that was in the distance, the hills. So
Yep.
all you could see was the houses
Nice.
and the yellow lights. So there was not much more to than just taking a snap of that. And then there's other times where, of course, I'll use long exposures. I'll use focus stacking depending on the scene, and exposure blending depending on the scene, of course.
Yeah. Nice. So in the field, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that catches your eye that says, yep, that's the composition that I want?
I usually have something in mind
Okay.
beforehand. Again, like I was saying before, I'll scout out the areas. So if I'm scouting, I'm looking for, to be honest with you, I don't really have anything in. I'm just looking for,
Shapes or color or the combination of the two.
yeah, definitely shapes, definitely color for sure. If I'm in a fishing community, I'm looking for something a little that stands out from the town itself. Usually it's a fishing stage, could be a boat, could be reflections. And if I'm in along a coastline, of course, sea stacks are some of my favorites. I will look, see if there's an unusual, anything unusual about the coastline itself. See what way the water's hitting the coast. Maybe I could do some interesting long exposures,
Sure,
cratering.
sure. So is this a full-time career or a hobby, or what is it in your life, and how do you balance the rest of your life with the photography side of things?
It's just a side thing right now, and I think that's the way it will be. I do have a full-time job, so I have two kids and a wife, so I need that security.
Yep.
But it is a nice little side gig, so I do make money in several different ways,
Sure.
from print to licensing to sometimes I'll pick up a contract for an advertising company and I'll do a bit of work there. It keeps me quite busy considering a full-time job and two kids.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So what techniques have you got to try and get that balance right? Obviously, the photography can take a bit of time, going out scouting, getting the shots, then coming back editing. Are you doing your own prints, or are you using a print service to manage that side of things? What are you doing to
I do
streamline
use
things?
a print service actually. I've been using them for a long while. There's a place here called Newfoundland Canvas,
Okay.
and they do an excellent job. I don't really want to get involved in the printing side of things myself.
So,
I would just rather somebody else take care of that. I just do the shooting
yeah,
and the editing.
fair enough. I think the printing side of things is a bit of a black art.
Yeah.
If you don't, it's a bit arcane, and working out how to operate with all the different inks and papers and what's going to look good with that particular image is a pretty tough choice, I think. And yeah, I'd rather leave it to the specialists. It's not my speciality, certainly.
Yes, I agree.
So are you working closely with the guys at Newfoundland Canvas, or are you just send them the files and they send you back the finished product, or do you have a real strong dialogue between you?
What they do is they have a sites called Art Funnels basically, and what that is, it's a free website basically,
Okay.
and pretty much any artist, if they want, they can set it up there and upload your files, and you as the artist would promote it,
Yep.
and they take care of the printing side of things. I do stay in contact with them from time to time if I have a particular question or issue or anything like that.
Sure.
But to be honest with you, I've been doing work with them for probably 4 or 5 years now, and I've had no issues. And their print quality is excellent. Yeah, I've had no issues at all.
Yeah. So in terms of where you shoot, do you stay fairly local, as in Newfoundland, or do you go further afield, branching out into Nova Scotia, other parts of Canada, the US, and international travel?
Nova Scotia, I would love to go to, but right now it's just all Newfoundland. I definitely got my certain locations in mind that I want to hit. Of course, the West Coast is next.
Yep.
Next year is Francois. It's a place that's on the south coast of Newfoundland, and the only way to get in there is by boat.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it's like the town is in this little
Mm-hmm.
fjord, and so you go in there by boat, of course, and there's another fjord, I believe, up on the back somewhere as well. So it's quite isolated, and I think there's only 200 people living there now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward. So next July, I think I'm gonna take a shot down there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as of right now, Newfoundland is my playground when it comes to landscape photography, and it probably will be for a long time to come, considering
Yeah.
the
Well,
young
why
family
would you go
that
anywhere
I
else
have
when
here.
you got so
Yeah,
much? Yeah.
for sure. There's no shortage of anything to shoot here.
Yeah. What's your most memorable experience that you've had while taking photos?
I would say probably recent. That trip to Bjorn was quite memorable. Shortly after that scene I explained to you earlier about the fog,
Yep.
I was going to go down to Chambers Cove,
Okay.
and when I went down, and it was quite foggy along the coast, so I waited there for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 hours, hanging around, checking out the coast, checking out different spots, hoping that the fog would lift, and it never did. So I decided to head. It was probably an hour away to this place called Harbor Mill. There was this sea stack that was pretty well next to the beach, and it
Mm.
had a couple of trees on top, so it was very
Nice.
interesting.
Yep.
So I went down there in the evening, and I was blown away actually by the mountains in that area. Very close, in my opinion, to Gross Mourne in
Mm-hmm.
size. And so I set up that night, had took a few shots. The light wasn't the best. So the next morning I got up, took a few shots again. And I thought the light was done. I picked up my tripod, my camera, started to walk back to my truck, and I turned around and the light just started to turn red.
That's always the way. As soon as you
Yep.
pack your tripod up, it's on.
But yeah, so I ran back down, of course, I took a few shots, and I got something what I thought was pretty good. So then I decided I didn't get a chance to look around the night before, so I decided to have a quick look around to see if I could get something before the light left.
Yep.
And there's a little place called Bay Largent. And
Mhm.
as you're driving along the mountains, there's this little road that goes across to Bay Largent, and it's like across the bay. The road is like in the middle of the bay, going
Yep.
across to Bay Largent. And I looked back and I saw the mountains. The mist was rolling along the mountains. The sun was just coming up over it, and there was a beautiful reflection. So I took a few shots there. Went inside the community, and there was a boat sitting there with beautiful reflections, a mountain in the background, and then
Nice.
there was a fishing stage there, and the mountains in the background with the mist. It was just, I think it was some of the best shots I've taken
Fantastic.
in the span of probably 40 minutes.
Nice.
So
Very
that's
good.
probably definitely one of the most memorable moments
Yeah. How
of my
about horror
career.
stories? Everyone's got a horror story.
Okay, so besides the bald eagle, I do have another one. My first time in no, second time in Grossmore, actually. There's a place called Rocky Harbor, and there's a lighthouse nearby.
Yep.
So I decided to do a little bit of a astro that night, and with the lighthouse, and there's this little trail near the lighthouse, and next to the trail, there's a set of trees,
Yep.
and I hear, and there's a field on the other side of the trees. So I hear whoosh coming through the field. Of course, that got my attention.
Yep.
Next thing you know, I see the trees rattling. And I tried to turn on my flashlight. For whatever reason, I must have had it on a setting where it was blinking, so I couldn't get
No.
a real good view to see what it was. And when I did do that, I heard a little bit of a squeal, and of course, I took the tripod out and ran over to the lighthouse. Looked back, I didn't see anything, so I decided to just head back to my car. And I looked up the sounds for bears.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure it was a black bear.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so it was quite. If I had a hair, it would be hair raising. That's for sure. Yeah, it
So
was definitely.
do you take precautions like carrying bear spray or anything like that around with you? Or
No, I don't. As far as I know, bear spray is illegal here.
oh, okay.
But
Didn't
yeah,
know
but no, I don't. But if you look up bear attacks in Newfoundland,
that. Yeah.
I don't think there are any. I tried to look it up just to see.
Yeah. Okay.
I was just curious one day to see, but the bears here, generally speaking, they're more afraid of people than you
Yeah.
are. They're
Mostly
pretty
that.
skittish. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We
You don't
just
get the brown bears there, do you? Or
no, just black bears.
just black bears? Yeah.
Some coyotes.
They tend to be a little bit more afraid of humans than the browns. The browns tend to be more aggressive.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Still at night, nothing worse than having a large carnivorous wild animal rooting
Oh
around in
no.
the grass near you.
Oh yeah. It took me a little while to get to sleep that night.
Can imagine.
The adrenaline was going. Yeah. But luckily, I haven't had a run-in like that again. But I am going down to the West Coast, so they're more abundant in that area.
Yeah.
My part of the island, it's very rare to see a black bear, so I don't usually have to worry about that on my side. But once you hit Central and then the West Coast, that's where most of the black bears are.
Yeah, sure. What's the practice of photography taught you about the world?
Interesting question. It's opened my eyes a little bit in the sense of the way I see light and
Mm.
sorry, as a pause.
No, that's fine. As I say, I
Yeah.
edit them out, so it's not a problem.
Okay.
I can make this string together so it sounds like a coherent sentence without too much
I hope
trouble.
so. Oh, okay.
So you said it opens your eyes to the way light. What about the way that you interact with the landscape and with the land that you're on? Is it showing you anything that you probably didn't think about before you picked up a camera?
It's definitely made me more observant, that's for
Mm.
sure. Whereas before, I would probably drive by or walk by a place I probably would not have looked at before. Now I find that I'm always looking, especially in the evening or in the morning, to see what the light looks like on a particular object or on the grass or how it's hitting the water, just to see how interesting the light is. Whereas before, it would have just been a mundane thing for me. So it's definitely made me more observant.
Yeah, cool. What's your routine in the field? Do you do anything in particular that you always do? I mean, what's the first thing once you've hiked into your location, you've got to your location? Is it tripod up, straight into taking shots, or are you more introspective around it and soaking in the atmosphere before you get into it?
A little bit of soaking in the atmosphere a little bit, but usually what I'll do is I won't even take out the camera. I'll just look around, see what's interesting, and once I find something that I think is a little bit interesting, I'll pull out the camera, look at it through the viewfinder. I always prefer looking through the viewfinder because
Yep.
I find I can pick up on. I watch for the edges
Yep.
of the frame just to see how it's going to affect the foreground or the clouds or any lines, anything like that.
Sure.
I definitely I'll do that. And then once I think I have something, that's when the tripod will come out.
Yep.
But sometimes before that, I will use my phone because I'll put
Yep.
on the wide on my phone just to see, okay, is that going to be interesting? Because instead of just taking out my camera. And once I'm satisfied, I'll take out the tripod, put the camera on the tripod, and look through the viewfinder again. I might shift it around slightly. I might lower the tripod a little bit or raise it just to get that perfect little composition. And then
Mm.
I'll just try to zoom in, zoom out, and try to exclude anything that I don't want in the frame or include anything. And then from there, I'll do a few test shots of different shutter speeds. Takes
Yep.
for instance, if I'm doing a seascape, I'll start with usually a half a second shutter speed because that's usually my favorite. I usually find water at a half second looks very interesting,
Yep.
and I may increase it or decrease it based off that, and or I may consider doing an extreme long exposure. And from there, I'll probably just play around with it, and I may do some bracketing and exposure blend after if I think I need it. But most of the time, I usually like to shoot to the side of the sun because I usually find the light a little bit more interesting that way.
Yeah.
Plus,
Yeah.
it's a little less work in post.
Yeah. True.
But yeah, I will shoot toward the sun if I have to. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Cool. So you've got your shot. You're pretty happy with it. Are you straight home and into the editing suite, or do you leave it lying around on the hard drive for a few hours, days, months, years before you get into it?
It depends on the shot. Some shots I get a little overexcited.
Yep.
So I'll probably get in and just play. Now I probably won't finish the shot right away. I might just do a quick edit just to see where it can go.
Yeah. Got it.
And yeah, so I'll just play around for a little bit. And again, I might not fully edit it. And usually I find that I'll wait until I'm in the mood to actually sit down and edit.
Yep.
I won't force myself to do it because I love editing, so I want it to be fun. So I
Yeah.
really don't want to force myself to do it.
Yeah. Fair.
But yeah, I'll definitely let some images sit. I've had images where I've had on my hard drive for almost 2 years,
Wow.
and then I would finally edit them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
after, of course, I've edited all my favorites. And sometimes what happens, your tastes change, or you see something you didn't see before,
Yeah.
or you learned a new editing technique that made it a little bit more interesting. But other than that's pretty much how I do it.
Cool. And are you Lightroom, Photoshop combined, or just one or the other, or and stacks of layers, or are you fairly minimal with your edits?
It depends on the shot again. Like that, a good example would be that one in Fjord, for instance. I do use Lightroom and Photoshop. I'll usually just do a little bit of shadow work and a little bit of highlight work just to get it to the exposure roughly that I want
Yep.
and bring it into Photoshop. And with this shot that was from Bjord, and I just a little bit of contrast work, not a whole lot, no exposure blending, just a simple shot, and just make sure I had my shadows and my contrast where I wanted it, and a little bit of saturation work. But other than that, not much. But I will go into exposure blending. I'll use luminosity masks at times. It depends on the shot again.
Yep.
But that's pretty much it. That's
Yeah.
all I'll go.
Do you
That's pretty
find
much what I'll.
do you find those ones that you don't need to do too much to more satisfying, or do you really, you said you liked editing, do you really like those ones that you actually put that little bit of extra polish on, take your time over and put a little bit more effort? Which ones do you tend to gravitate towards in terms of the ones that you like more?
I do like to edit, but I'm still excited about a shot that I don't have to do a whole lot of work, as long as the shot, it's beautiful and it's what I was going for, and I did capture what I wanted in camera. I'm still good with that, but at the same time, I have no qualms at sitting down for a good hour or so to edit an image if need be.
Yeah.
If I'm in the right mood, no problem. I have no problem sitting down and editing for an hour. But yeah, either way it floats. Yeah, I
Oh, that's
definitely
cool.
either or.
So you mentioned that a lot of your craft was learnt from YouTube. Did you do anything else other than that, or was it purely self-teaching through learning through others' experience?
Most of it was self-teaching, in the sense, like, yes, I would learn a few things from YouTube if I wanted to learn the exposure triangle, or if I wanted to learn long exposures. I would just pick one thing and go out, try that, and then on to the next thing, sort of thing. But that's pretty much the way I did it over the years. I would just learn a little bit here, a little bit there, and something would nag at me where it just doesn't. Why does my work, there's just something not right about it.
Something
So it could be
missing.
the shadow. Yeah, or it looked too contrasty. I think a lot of that is just, it's not so much the tools themselves, it's just your eye getting used to where your contrast should be, where your shadows should be,
Yeah,
where your highlights, where your colors should be. And maybe that's not necessarily where it should be. Maybe it's more your tastes changing
yeah,
over time,
yeah.
where you just prefer that look. So it's hard to say, really. It doesn't necessarily mean you're better.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
everyone's on their own learning curve, and some are, I won't say towards the end of their learning curve, but they're towards the mastery of their craft as opposed to the beginners. And I think it's an important message for people that are just starting out or have been doing it for a little while and they're dissatisfied with their own work, maybe because they're comparing it to somebody else. What I tend to advise people is compare it to your work 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And when you have a look at that, you go, okay, now I see how far I've actually progressed. And I know that I'm actually progressing and not, and unless you're still just taking it out and sending the saturation slider to 11, you know.
yeah, 100%. Now that you say it that way, there has been a couple times when I did go back and look at some of my work that I did in the past. So I can honestly say I have improved compared to then.
Yeah,
But over the last couple of years, I don't know if it's improvement or if it's just like what I said before. It's just my
yeah,
taste have
taste
changed
change. Yeah. And
a
that's the
little bit,
thing,
right?
your tastes do change as you get more exposed to it, as you gain experience in it. I think your tastes definitely change. I know
Yeah,
I'm trying to veer towards I guess the less popular images that you see floating
yeah,
around Instagram, where quite vivid, quite vibrant images. I like vibrant colors and
yeah. Me too,
so
of
forth, and
course.
I like an impactful shot. But I'm also actually, I've decided what I want to do is more of those gentler images and the ones that aren't quite
Hmm.
as dramatic necessarily. And
Yeah,
that's a combination of the technique, but also the subject matter as well. So looking for those compositions that lend themselves to that sort of gentler feel as opposed to that
hmm,
more dramatic and vibrant feel. That said, if there's a dramatic storm sky or something like that, I'll get out there and shoot it.
for sure. I get it. Mhm.
So, are there any particular photographers or tutorials that you've particularly followed to learn from? I've got a few favorites myself, but I'm just interested in the ones that you pulled
We
out.
might have some similar. We might have some
Probably.
similar. Nick Page, of course.
Yeah.
He's a given for sure, and he puts out a lot of great stuff. Ryan Dyer, I definitely like some of his stuff. And who else? Mad. Peterson. I
Yeah,
haven't looked at any of his tutorials though, but I do follow him. Find him very entertaining. And who else off the top of my head now? Ryan Dyer, Nick Page, Matt Peterson. I think that's pretty much it. That,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I don't spend too much time like watching tutorials. It's only every now and then, like I said before, where
You got something
if
specific.
something's nagging at me
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, I'd like to improve in this area, then I'll go looking.
Yeah, in terms of editing, for me, I don't think you can go past. If you want to get down deep into how Photoshop and or Lightroom
Yeah.
works, the F64 Academy
Oh,
stuff.
okay. Yes, I've watched some of his stuff before.
Yeah,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
terms of understanding how those sliders, what they're doing
Mm.
to your
Yeah.
image, I don't think there's a, what's his name? Blake Rudis, I think his name is. I don't think there's a better example of how to learn the craft of actually editing your image in terms of understanding the not just the technical, the aesthetic qualities of what those sliders are actually going to do to your image. For me, I've learned so much and changed my processing technique around not necessarily following everything that he's doing, but I've built a workflow that kind of lends quite heavily from some of his work.
Actually, there is one guy, and this is when I first started learning editing, actually. Anthony Morgan, I think it's Anthony Morgan.
Okay.
Anthony Morganti, I think his name is, and basically he does a lot of, it's all free stuff on YouTube, and he does a lot about Lightroom, and he just
Yep.
goes through all the tools, what they can and can't do. And I do remember actually now that's how I started with Lightroom. Yeah, I learned all the ins and outs and all the things you can and can't do. And well, yeah, it was a great way to start. It was definitely, I definitely learned a lot from those
Mm.
tutorials.
Do you prefer photographing alone or with other people?
I would say mostly alone. I do company. I used to go out with a few photographers in the past, and we definitely had a few laughs and a good time. But I find sometimes can be a little bit distracting.
Yep.
So if I'm going to a new place, I'd prefer to go by myself because it's so I can just focus on what I need to do. But if I'm
Yeah.
going to say like a place like Chance Cove,
Yep.
every now and then I'll go with a friend of mine up in Chance Cove. I have no problem with that because I know the area, I know what to expect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm probably going to come out with something just a little different, or it's just for a bit of fun. It's not necessarily I'm going there to try and get an epic shot.
Yep.
But generally speaking, yeah, I do prefer to shoot on my own.
Is that a conscious decision that you make, or is it just that's just what you like doing?
I would say it's a bit of both. I do shooting and by myself. I like to spend time by myself. So that little escape sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nice to just go out and go on a little hike by yourself, catch a
Yeah. I,
sunrise.
I got to agree. I sometimes like that time where I don't have to think of anyone else's needs
Mhm.
or whatever. And it's about what you want to do. And it's taking time for yourself to get in the zone and get in there, do what you want to, and come out with something that you're happy with.
Yes, for sure. And I get it. But at the same time, I do enjoy every now and then getting out with another photographer and having a chat. And of
Mm,
course, I do like to talk photography. So it's definitely something I like to do as well.
sure.
But the time by myself, I definitely enjoy that.
Yeah. What do you do if you hit a creative wall?
I don't know if I get that many creative walls because I do go through periods where I'm just too busy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I can't do photography. So I think I'm getting that time away
Yeah.
and I'm not just doing photography all the time. So it's enough that when it comes time to go do some photography, I'm recharged
Yeah.
and I'm excited about going and checking out a new location or going on a trip. So yeah, it's definitely something I don't run into very often.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about being a photographer?
I don't, it's probably never been 100% satisfied
Okay, that's great.
about where you are as a photographer. Go, you're never going to completely master it, and there's always something to learn. So that's definitely one of my favorite things. The time alone out on a hike or shooting a sea stack, that's definitely up there. That's probably why I choose landscape photography. I prefer landscapes over people photography for sure. Yeah,
I'm with
100%.
you there.
Yeah.
Landscape doesn't talk back, doesn't demand
No,
to get the prints 2 minutes after you've taken the shot.
no, I 100%. I will if I have to. I just finished a contract job there yesterday actually, where it did involve people, but it's not too much where it's portrait photography or wedding
But
photography. So it's just setting up a few scenes where you're for tourism basically.
yeah, yeah, nice.
So it's definitely not as bad.
Yeah, the landscape plays a bigger part of it.
Yes,
The,
100%.
the
And
people
they're just there to
that
add to the story.
yeah, yeah.
That's right.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing photographers right now?
I gotta say, probably AI is going to be one of the biggest, I think, personally, it's going to be one of the biggest challenges. I'm not sure about what we're doing as landscape photographers will, but I think,
Yeah,
and I'm sure you're aware of Dolly. Is it Dolly? I think
yeah,
is what
yep,
it's called. Yeah. I think the product photographers are going to get hit pretty hard
yeah,
because
totally
that's,
agree.
yeah, but from some of the things that we do, the art side probably will, I think, because it can pretty much create some epic looking scenes. But from a tourism point of view, I'm not sure about that though, because I think with that, people want to see scenes of places
That actually
that
exists.
actually exist. Exactly. So if you have an AI trying to recreate that, and there's a few elements in there that never existed in the first place, I don't think that's going to go over too well.
No,
No.
that's not as advertised.
No, exactly. Right. But I could be completely wrong. Who knows what way this is going to go? But it definitely does look like it's going to change things in
Absolutely.
the
Yeah,
next 5 to 10 years, I'd say.
yeah. What do you see as the future of photography or landscape photography in particular?
Landscape photography? That's a good question. It's not something I really think about, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, again, I have a full-time job and I love photography. But if tomorrow I had to quit photography, especially for my family, I'd have no problem doing that. So if there is no future for photography in the next 5 to 10 years, I'll be okay with that.
Sure, sure.
But as far as where I think it's going to go, that's tough. Gear is getting better for sure. I think it's just going to be easier. It's going to be the barrier for entry is going to continue to get easier and easier for people because either the gear is going to make it easier to shoot scenes that were very difficult to shoot 5 years ago,
Yep.
like exposure blending, for instance. Your like cameras now, you can get that one shot,
Yeah,
really.
that's
So you
right.
don't really need to use that. Focus stacking, that's pretty well taken care of now. I
Yeah,
think it's the D850, and there are a few other cameras I believe that have it as well. You have that in your tool bag right off the bat. You don't even have to learn that if you don't want to.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I would say that it's definitely going to get easier and the barrier for entry is going to get lower and it'll probably become more competitive as
Mm,
time goes on, especially if you're trying to make a bit of money at it. But if you're just doing it for a bit of fun, I can't really. What's really going to change is if you're doing it for fun, you're doing it for the experience. You're doing it
that's
for
right. Yeah.
seeing some of these places that you don't get to see every day. So
And
it's less
I,
about.
I don't think people that are doing it creatively as well, art for art's sake, that's always going
Yeah,
to be what they do. And
yeah.
AI isn't going to force them out unless our robot overlords come and take all their cameras away.
I read a post on Vero's Mark Adamus,
Yep.
and I don't know if you saw this post, and that's what he was talking about. He was talking about AI, and he said something along the lines of how it doesn't matter how good AI gets, basically, is that I took this shot, I
That's right.
experienced it, I edited it. This is my shot, basically. I don't
Yeah.
know. He didn't say it exactly like that, but
Yeah, that was the essence of it. Yeah.
the essence of it. Yes. So in the end, it doesn't matter uh,
Yeah.
if, especially if you're doing it for the experience.
Yeah. What tips would you have for someone that's just starting out in landscape photography?
I guess the way I did it was just start small, start with something specific that you're interested in. I always liked long exposure, so that was one of the first things I tried to figure out. So stick to doing small things, small steps, and don't do editing starting off, of course. Just learn how to do things in camera first and manual. Definitely learn how to do manual. That's pretty much all I use is manual.
Yep.
I'm not even sure if I'd know how to use any other mode, to be honest with you. But and then I would say go and learn a little bit about editing because editing is another, you know yourself, it's just it's another whole
Big old beast, and
aspect.
there's a lot to get your arms around, isn't there?
100%, and take your time with that because you can go in a lot of wrong directions. I feel like I'm still doing that at times.
Yep.
You really got to be take your time with that and just pay attention to what you're doing. And there's so much out there that you can, it's unlimited.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you like to do when you're not out shooting?
When I'm not out shooting, spending time with my kids,
Nice. Yeah.
that's definitely, I'll definitely try to do some things with them, camping sometimes. Besides that, reading. I love to read science fiction.
Okay.
Yeah, I find it's just something completely different, brings me down and relaxes me.
Yep.
And work, and that's it pretty much. That's my life. Work, reading, kids,
Yep.
photography.
Nice. Who's your favourite science fiction author?
My favorite science fiction author, let me see, that's tough. I would say who's the author I'm reading now. I'm reading a book now. It's called Earth Abides.
Okay. Yep.
Andrews is his last name.
Yeah.
Really good. And I like Ian M. Banks. A few there. Fantasy. I like fantasy, of course.
Yeah.
J.R.R.
Cool.
Tolkien. Yeah, some of my favorite.
So, are there any other photographers out there that you think I should be talking to?
Yeah, sure. There's a guy I've been following for years, Frank Delurgy, his name.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation, but I can definitely send you his Instagram handle. Yeah, he's really good, actually. Really good. Been following him for years. There's a guy on the East Coast. His name is Adam Hill. He works out of Nova Scotia.
Yep.
So a lot of great images there. And one more, probably Jake Graham is a
Okay.
guy. Yeah, I don't know. Do you know him?
I've
No.
seen his work. I don't
Yeah,
know him yet. Yeah.
yeah. He does a lot of stuff around Canada.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I'll send you his information.
Fantastic. Thank you for that.
No
Well,
problem.
I got my last question, which, if you've listened to any of my podcasts, what's coming? Do you like
Yeah,
pineapple on pizza?
obviously. Love it. I don't eat pizza like I used to, but I absolutely love pineapple on pizza. And I remember as a kid, the first time I heard someone say, "Do you want pineapple on pizza?" And I was just like, "What?" I thought it was gross, but when I did try it, I never turned back.
So you reckon those ones that are against it, they just haven't tried it?
Nope, that's it. It's almost like the peanut butter banana sandwiches. You ever have a peanut butter banana sandwich?
I can't say I have. I've had peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, peanut butter and jelly is great, but peanut butter and banana is wicked.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to trust you on that, and I'll have to give it a go.
Yeah, that was another one I thought was gross. And when I tried it, I was like, wow,
Uh,
wicked. Mm.
wow. All right. Thank you very much for spending some time with us today, Gord. It's been really fantastic getting to know you. Where can people find your work?
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Vero.
All right. No
Just search
worries.
Gord Follett and you'll find me.
I'll make sure there's links in the show notes. Thanks again, mate.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.